Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. Hope everyone's doing all right, hanging in there. This week I thought we'd look at the color palette I was using last week in the painting. I know we jumped right in and I rattled off some names of pigments, but the classical flush palette is yellow ochre, kind of a strong red, cadmium red, naphthol red, pyrrole red, um, vermilion back in the day, and then kind of a desaturated cool or like a blackish blue. For this, I'm just using a really cold blue, ivory black. And you can see I've done this on this just the panel, kind of a cardboard panel canvas, and I've toned it gray just like I would using a gray palette to mix my colors on, because it'll show the relative color a little bit better, but that's not necessary. So I thought, since things are starting to open back up this week, we can maybe move away from using household items like soy sauce, and I didn't really want to go into like ketchup and mustard, so I went out to the dollar store, the Dollar Tree, and I was surprised to find out actually have really affordable art supplies, enough to kind of do this project at home for a pretty reasonable price. So we're not going to do anything this drastic. What I did here was I took just my straight yellow ochre, straight cad red, and straight ivory black, and then saw how they mixed with each other. So if you mix these two to one part together, you get this nice kind of muted orange. And then if you lean more towards the red, you get the orangey, the reddish orange, and you get the yellowish orange. And then same thing with these two, just meeting halfway to get this kind of mauve color. And then what goes in between there, same thing, this kind of, just imagine this wrapping back around. So yellow ochre mixed with ivory black, it gives you this kind of muted army green. So in a sense, a full rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, but muted down in certain areas like the greens and the purples, and the oranges. I guess the red's the strongest color, but it's definitely enough to get any color skin tone you have, so, or need. And then you can add things to your palette as you see fit to kind of bump up or heighten the chroma in certain areas. But this is a great place to start because we're not dealing with too much. You can see just over here we've already got a lot of beautiful skin tones. We're going to do something kind of a abridged version of this, just simple. But all we really need is a panel to paint on. I like working on a panel just because it's easier to tape down onto a kind of a firm surface. You can do this on loose canvas, which you would also have to tape down. And that's the nice thing about doing it on something like this, is you can just roll it up and take it with you if you want to carry your color chart with you while you're getting used to this palette. But this is nice too, because then you can just like lean it up against a wall in your studio and see it. So it's nice to have that structure. The other things we need for this though are tape and pencil and a ruler to kind of grid this out. So in this lesson, this first part, we're going to figure out the placement of our tape and our squares, our color swatches, and we'll draw and tape off our chart. And then next section, we will go ahead and paint it. So for this section, all you really need is the panel. So I found this panel at the Dollar Tree. It's a nice kind of standard painter size, 11 by 14. And then all you need is this stuff for today. So tape, any kind of masking tape. You saw on this guy, the thinner the better, because it just leaves less kind of negative space in between. But I realized whatever we've got at home will work. So I've got this 3/4 inch tape. I didn't want to go out and buy special tape. It's masking tape, so just like painter's tape. The blue tape will work just fine for this too. Then a pencil and ruler for this part of it. And that'll get us through this. And then next video, we'll go over adding the paint. And I found these at the Dollar Tree. We've got kind of white, black, red, and yellow. And that's all we need to get this done. The important thing here is to make sure that you're buying acrylic paint. I did see they had tempera paint, which is also water soluble, but I think it can be reactivated with water, so it's easy to clean off your clothes. For this, we want to stick with acrylic paint. And then there's quite a few in these bigger tubes and a little bit less in these smaller ones, but you might need more white than you do any other color. So I got this in white, this one in black, and it didn't say cad red or vermilion or anything like that. It says scarlet, which is just kind of an orangier red. it's almost like a fire engine red, but maybe with a touch of yellow in it. That'll work just fine. And then instead of a bright yellow, we're doing yellow ochre. So in effect, we have those three primary colors, right? Red, blue, and yellow, but we've got these two which are a little bit desaturated. And then to apply it, I'm going to be using a palette knife. It'll be nice because we can just go over where we taped and just swipe it in, and then the tape will catch any excess paint, and then we'll pull that off. You'll have nice clean squares. But you can also pick up, I saw they have these really nice variety, nice sizes, even different softer hairs and firmer hairs, acrylic brush set. That was another $1. So all in all, it's about $5. I think that's pretty reasonable, and we can definitely use these as long as we wash them well. And we're not going to use all this paint for just simple exercise. It can also be done on just really cheap kind of, I bought this roll of crafters or craft paper. I mean, this is the idea here is that we're just getting used to the color palette, but if you want it to last and you want to refer back to it, then having it on a panel is really nice. Okay, so that covers that. If you wanted to take an even cheaper approach, this whole set is $1. So all you'd really need is you could spend $1 on this and $1 on that, and you've got a $2, and we can still do a color chart with that. What I would recommend is you can see the difference here in the yellows, and you could either use straight black, or you could push it and you could kind of mix your blue black 1-to-1 and get a nice kind of cold blue black. And then I would just take a drop of that and add it to this to achieve this yellow ochre. You're just going to be cooling and neutralizing it with the black. And then in effect, you've got kind of a yellow ochre, your straight red, and then a blue, black, and white. And you could do a whole color chart with just this little set. The brush is not the best kind of brush, but if you're really on a budget and just want to spend $2, you might not need as big of a canvas. You could go with a smaller canvas too, but you're only going to spend $2. You can still do this exercise at home. So I think that's pretty reasonable. For me, I spent $5. These 4 guys, canvas. I already have the tape and pencil ruler at home, and I'm going to use my palette knife. All right, so let's get into breaking down how we're going to set up our chart. So before we even start by applying paint or even pencil to our panel, I like to just do some quick math to figure out where this grid is going to set on this panel. Each one's going to be a little bit different. You might not even have an 11x14 panel. You might be using a different size. So to just start this way is a great practice to have. I like to think about, one, the swatch size or the square of color. I don't like to go too small, much smaller than an inch wide for my swatches. If they get, I've done 3/4 of an inch, and at that size, it just becomes a little bit hard to identify the color. So about an inch, and then the spacing in between, or the negative space, is going to be determined by whatever masking tape you have around. This 1/2 inch masking tape or 1/4 of an inch masking tape is great because it doesn't take up too much room. But I know we just have what we have, and I have this 3/4 of an inch. It's always good to double check what you've got, because like this looks like 1/2 inch to me if I eyeball it, but if I measure it, it's 3/4 of an inch. So measure your masking tape. That'll determine the negative space you'll have in between the swatches. And the reason I do that, I use masking tape, is we get all this over paint, and then it's just so satisfying at the end to peel it off, and you get really crisp, clean squares. It's really nice. So we want to determine how many swatches we're going to have. So we have our 3 colors of paint. We have our yellow, our red, and our blue black. And then we're going to draw it out with our white just to show how it changes. Just in review, color, right, is made up of its hue. Is it yellow, red, or blue? It's, the in-between, the orange, the violet, and the green. Wrapping the yellow and the blue make the green. That's going to be your hue. The value is the lightness or darkness. So we're going to lighten the value. And the reason we're lightening the value is to show how these colors change with the addition of white. And that brings us to our third one, which is chroma. And chroma is kind of, sometimes you hear brightness or you hear saturation, but really what it is the strength of that color. Brightness is kind of misleading because even if you add white to blue, it's getting lighter, it's getting brighter, but it's not getting more chromatic. And same thing with saturation, not also a great word to describe the potency of a color or the strength of a color, because we can add white to blue, red, and yellow. And in the case with blue, let's take a look at like something like this. Once we add white to this black, it actually feels like it's becoming more chromatic. Or even right here like this color is kind of dark, you can't see what it is. As you add white to it, it really starts to pop. And so you get these really nice, stronger, more chromatic violets. And the saturation is going to be the strongest up here where the color is fully saturated out of the tube. So sometimes the most saturated things are not the most chromatic things. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking for those three things: our hue, our value, and then the chroma. So how white affects each one of these. And we need to determine how many swatches are going to be across our width and then like the height of this. So we know at least we have 3 because we have our pure colors or pure pigments. And then we want to go for the secondaries. Now you can go for those tertiaries like in that big chart, but I think for time, and then this one panel is quite a bit smaller. So maybe I'll just go for the 3 primaries and the 3 secondaries, and we won't get into the tertiaries. But if you have the size of canvas and you have the time, feel more than welcome to go into these tertiaries. The thing there, just like with our value scale, we want to keep it odd numbers, right? Not odd in the whole length of this. Like if we add this up, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across the top. Or if we add the tertiaries, it's going to be 12. But you want to keep this kind of mixing from yellow and then to orange to red, so that's 3, so that's odd. If you were going to add a tertiary, you want to keep it 5, right? Red to orange, you have a red-orange, and you have orange to yellow, and you have a yellow-orange. So still, think about those odd numbers, because you always get a middle, and that makes it really easy for mixing. So we decided we're going to do our primaries and our secondaries. So we're going to have 6 swatches across the top, probably about 1 inch wide, because I want it to be wider than the negative space and big enough to see. So we're going to have 6 swatches at 1 inch. And then think about the negative space in between each one of those. It's going to be 5 negative spaces, because we don't need one between green and yellow, because they're at the end. So 5 negative spaces at 3/4 of an inch. We get 15 quarters, or 3 3/4 plus the 6 equals 9 inches and 3/4 for our total width, right, across this whole panel. That's going to be the width of the chart that I have to fit on here. And that's going to be out of, the panel is 11 by 14. So minus 9 3/4 equals 4 inches and 1/4. That's how much space, if I were just to center it or corner it over here, I'm going to have 4 inches and 1/4 left of area on my panel. And this is completely like aesthetic. I just like my charts to be pretty. You know, the spacing is going to always be different. If you do a circle, it's going to be even different. But like, I like to keep everything kind of pretty. I measured like the 14 and then figured out how I was going to fit 9 squares in there, or even in that larger chart. And then the thing here too is once you know the size, 9 for the complete width, you want to be able to leave room on, if I were to divide this in half and center it, it would be 2 1/8 on either side. And maybe that might not be big enough room to write notes. And I want to take note of things like the brand maybe, so Rich Art, and then the pigment, Scarlet. So that way if I go to the store and I'm like, oh, what color was that I made that chart out of, I don't get like a red oxide or something. Or if you're looking for that Rich Art, but you accidentally buy a Crafter Square, it might be a different color completely, because every company makes their pigments different. So it's important to label the name of the pigment and then the brand who makes it. So you want to leave ample room to leave those kind of notes. And then you might want to do a nice title like Classic Flesh Palette 2020, maybe when you made it. You can also see how pigments age in sunlight that way too. Okay, so we have 6 swatches with negative spaces equaling 9 3/4 across the top. Down the length of it, or the height of it, it's going to be, in the bigger chart, I did 5 kind of value shifts. So pure color, maybe like 75%, 50%, 25%, 5%. There's no really point in doing 0%, because then it's just pure white paint all the way across every swatch. That might be kind of redundant or just a lot to do, since we're only doing primaries and secondaries. I might not want to do 5 of each. So if we just simplified it maybe into 3. So let's say 3 swatches of value at 1 inch, and then the same negative spacing for the tape is going to be, if we're doing 3, we just have 2. So at 3/4, it's going to be 6/4 or 1 and 2/4 or 1.5. Is that right? 2 times 3, 6, 4, 1 and 1/4. Yeah. So 1 and 1/4 plus 3, 4.5 inches in total for kind of this right here, by 9 3/4. Important thing there to remember, just you're taking into account your swatch size and your swatch size and your negative space or tape size, and then just multiplying that by the number of colors you're using and the number of spaces in between those colors. So 4.5 for the height of this, 9 3/4 for the width. The panel is 14 and 11. So that gives me 6.5 extra length right here. If I were to put it all the way to the top, if we center that, that's going to give you 3 1/4 on each side. And that seems like plenty of room if I want to take notes. So I might as well just center this on my panel. And then same thing with the 9 as we did over here. We get 4 1/4 left over. And then if we centered that, we get 2 1/8. Okay, so that's going to be the border around, like if you imagine this as your color now, with all the squares and stuff in here, that's going to be the border we're going to aim for. So see, I figured that all out. Just some quick, simple math. Maybe not so quick. I'm a little bit slow at the math. But now we can jump in with our ruler and pencil and just mark where we're going to be on here. That way we can tape it off and then get right into color mixing next time. But I can't reiterate how this is important, just if you want to keep it clean and organized. And usually it takes me 1 or 2 times to get this right, even though I've done so many of these. So looking at my notes, we said the width of it is going to have 2 1/4 on each side. 2 1/8. So that's going to be my starting point. And then we want to end it somewhere around here. And then remember, we're going to start with 1 inch, so we're going to go up to 3 1/8. Take 3/4 of an inch. And then I like to put an X, just really lightly, and that's going to be the spot that gets painted over. And then from here, moving forward, we have another inch, and that's going to be the next swatch. So we got our yellow or orange. And we're going to continue on in this manner across here, and then we're going to do the same thing up here. And we don't need to actually grid this out. We don't want the light or the pencil to come through the paint. So I just like to do it on either edge, and then when I do my tape, I match it up. So I'm going to put it in fast forward. Okay, so I got both sides of those measured out. You could go ahead and do this side as well. I think I'm going to start and tape this off just to show you guys this part. And I'm going to do that because I have just a little bit of this left. And so I don't know if this is going to go all the way. I hope so. I hope I'm going to be able to do this whole chart in this. But I'm going to start with this and just tape all this off. And then if I see that I'm not going to make it for this other direction, then I might have to do the math and figure out what the new width if I have to switch tapes to a little bit larger size. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I got all those put down, and I actually feel pretty good that I'll be able to finish the entire grid with the same 3/4 inch tape. It's important when you put these down to press, especially along the edges here, to really seal it down. You could even take a hard object and smooth it down. That way none of the paint, especially if it gets thinned with some water, is going to slide under there and kind of bleed. The other thing that I think is important to mention is sometimes the tape, even though it is 3/4 of an inch, isn't a perfect 3/4 just by manufacturing process. So you can see where I maybe mark this 3/4 section, the tape's a little bit thinner. So I just tried to center it in between those 3/4 negative space marks that I put in there. That way it still keeps the inch swatches about the same. I just flip these around. And I don't like to press them down too firmly because then it could peel up the paper back here. But as long as they're sealed right to the edge, and especially we're going to be actually painting only within here, so not super important. Probably don't need to go all the way over if you don't want to. Okay, now we're going to do the exact same thing. You can see how I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for my swatches, and then the negative space, or preserving the white of the canvas. We're going to go and I'm going to notch off the exact same thing, trying to get those 3 swatches right here in the middle. And this is important too. I think you want to, when laying these down, attach it, look for your mark, attach it down, and then you can see if I lay it down and it kind of gets cattywampus, you want to pick it back up and try and keep it straight, looking at this line right here, making sure it doesn't like grab on and make another point that can kind of throw it off. So just trying to keep it just at this contact point here, and then picking up and aiming for your tick mark. And that'll ensure a nice straight edge. Press down. We've got all 18 swatches nice and taped off. You also saw I was marking on the tape. That's another option. If you wanted to put tape along the border here so that you could actually do your indications on a piece of tape and then pull them off at the end, leaving the white of the canvas and keeping the graphite on it, that's another option if you want it super clean. Now that you've got all that done, just make sure you have the amount you want on the top, the amount you want going down, and then you can, if you want to, just make this easier for you next time. You can go in here and indicate which ones are going to be which. So yellow, red, blackish blue, violets here, greens here, oranges here, and then maybe a 50% mixture, maybe a 10%. Again, we don't want to go 0 because it'll just be pure white. And so that sets you up for next time. Remember, for next time we're going to need a red, strong red, scarlet, if you're going to the dollar store. If you're going to an art store, you're looking for a cad red or a red medium, primary red, strongest one you can find. A yellow ochre, kind of a more grayed down, neutralized yellow. Ivory black, or if you can, a blue black, like a Payne's gray. And then just titanium white. And that'll be enough to set us up for going into the next video.